So my role, traditionally, I've been at Eversheds Sutherland for coming up for 5 years, is the classic sort of IT director, running all the normal operational back-end services all the way through to the client-facing. And I'll explain a little bit how sort of much my role has changed over the last 6 months to something completely different. I'm still called the IT director, but I've got a very different focus. I suppose the background for us, so we're, hopefully most people know who Eversheds Sutherland is. Like many of you here, large law firm, regional, global business, looking to expand, looking to dominate the world, looking to get up the rankings like everyone else does. We all want to win and be bigger than everyone else. That's the sort of the same mentality I suspect across a lot of law firms. But traditionally, our focus has been purely on large-scale applications, Intap-based, I-managed net documents, big email system, big infrastructure projects, all that good stuff, which is fine because that keeps the law firm running as well. And there hasn't really been much of an ambition. I've got to sort of balance that poll because I'm conscious some of those there can't see my face with that screen that's going to shadow as well. Balancing that with the stuff that actually clients are asking for much more. So historically we played with apps. Actually, it was a couple of lawyers that we employed yonks ago, and they happened to be very closely associated to our chairman, who got into app development. And they left Eversheds Sutherland and they created a business very different to Fliplet, where they coded and developed applications. So every time we wanted to do something with an application, we ended up having to spend quite a bit of money and, probably more importantly, take ages to do anything about it. And they were certainly not anywhere above maturity level 1 in what Ian's just said. There were apps that were very basic and probably brochureware, if anything, for our HR practice group. So we sort of had this historical relationship with these, a couple of guys that felt that law was a bit too hard, therefore let's go into technology. They did all right, and they're probably doing all right still, actually, but they just took too long. And I sort of think that, coverage 0.1% is probably quite generous. I suspect it was used by no more than, 10 people. But to give you a sense, it costs us about 50,000 quid to do it, which is not great maths, not great sort of mechanics. So I think historically we've only gone down the application route. We've only ever really developed something that is a classic IT project that was delivering big, laborious project plans and took yonks to do as well. And there was no flexibility, no agility, but that's probably was fine because no one was really asking for anything else. Most people didn't know some of the things that Fliplet can do now existed, and most of our clients didn't really care about live information and stuff that we need to do. So, probably that's the context that most people felt they were in, and that was maybe 3-4 years ago, where we sort of think there has to be a slightly better way of moving forward. I had a conversation with a client after I joined, so it would have been 2015. I joined 14, but 15. I had a conversation with a very large bank who I thought was going to just talk to us about, in a pitch, law and how good we are at law. They wanted to talk massively about technology. They wanted to talk about how technology is going to help them manage their high street branches in the UK and Ireland. And they're really interested about how data could be linked to their own data sets to make their decision making much more effective. And what they were saying is, can you give us something that allows me to understand why that high street bank in a certain city is costing us more than another one, not in terms of turnover of banks, but actually in the rent and everything else that goes on there as well. And it struck me that the data we're holding is so powerful, because if you blend it with the data that our clients are using, then you can imagine how much help we can give our clients, not on law, but on running their business. And what they said to me, they said, we want to see that information live. So when my cleaning contractor, or when my facilities management contractor, or when I go to a particular bank, I want to see some information about what the details, what the cost of that particular branch is. And the lawyers have all that; they have access to all that information. But they didn't want it on a big Excel. They didn't want a big Excel spreadsheet. They didn't want a big PowerPoint presentation. They wanted it on their mobile device. And in 2015, it's quite a tricky thing to be able to do. But that struck me that the technology and the information that we hold has got to get out there. It's got to get to a point where people can see it wherever they are, and what they need is ready access to it as well, not in a big ERP, not in something that gets submitted on a monthly basis. So whilst that wasn't them asking for a mobile app, they didn't say, can I have a mobile app, can you put me in contact with Ian and you can do some great stuff. That wasn't the conversation, unfortunately for Ian maybe. But it was very much thinking, yeah, there's more that we should be doing with our data. And that one example sort of led us to then think, well, we've got so much knowledge, how do we make sure we can share that with people on an easy basis? And people hate having to log in multiple times. The moment you give anyone a password other than their normal Active Directory password, your stuff, you're not going to get people going through to the next level easily. They'll forget their password. I forget my password. You've got to make it easy. So that was a sort of a bit of an awareness that give clients access to information, then you can probably do some great stuff with it as well. Clients have sort of since then, I suppose, and I think these are part of the trends, are now asking us much more for know-how, for knowledge, for whether it's live matter information, which is kind of a nirvana for many of our clients actually, and many law firms, on the fly. So the demands that we're now seeing for clients to what I think is self-serve, and I'm pretty certain in 5 years' time, many of us and large law firms amongst us will be charging clients on a monthly basis for services, not legal services just because we all have retained based contracts, but for services that involve access to data, access to knowledge, access to know-how. We've been up against very small law firms in niche areas who are providing that already. So, what I call high street law firms that are providing, for £10,000 a month, and that was a real figure from one of our, smaller competitors, access to a lot of information that is presented through a device or through a mobile app, which is really interesting because you think that's changing the model much more, where a large global law firm could be making a lot of its revenue in support services, in running retained contracts. It is about access to information and access to data. So I think that move to a more of a self-service model and providing people with access is going to happen. The way I see the potential of mobile apps is that we can sort of play with that without having to launch something, because none of my senior partners are going to go to any of our clients and say, can you now give us £10,000 a month for us to provide you information? It's just not going to happen. Whereas the ability now with an agile platform such as a mobile app development platform means that we can start playing with stuff. We can start creating things that show people, yeah, that could work. I could now, as a senior partner, sell that to a client, and I could see myself going to a large client and asking for some money for this service, for this information, for this data. And I think it's going to happen. I think it's just a nice way of seeing how we can use agile and iterative development in these sort of products to work on there as well. The other trend, and I've been in IT for yonks, I've done all the big sort of projects, all the big Prince 2 courses, all the large Gantt charts that come out. The other trend is people don't want to wait, and lawyers more so. I've only been in law since I've been at Eversheds Sutherland. Lawyers hate waiting for stuff. They work in a very agile, iterative way. Agile and lawyers, maybe you wouldn't think that sort of quite computes, but it does, because lawyers go to see a client asks them an opinion, asks them for advice. They don't say, I'll come back in 3 weeks' time because I've got loads of other things to have to do. I won't give you a big plan. I won't give you a big project plan. They work overnight, and by the morning, there's something in the client's mailbox, and that's actually quite a long period, that gives them the next stage. The client comes back, and it does this, and it happens in hours, it happens in days. That's classic agile methodology. That's what lawyers do. And this is the sort of world that technologists have to get into, because whether it's a marketing department or whether it's the client or whether it's our partners asking us to do things, if we have something that we can turn around really quickly, then that's going to be great, because it matches the way that our legal teams operate. It's not going back to a large SAP or a large Thomson Reuters style process. It's something that we can do on a much more agile basis. And if we can match our behaviour with the lawyers, then we're going to get a really good relationship with our clients, and that's going to only be a good thing for the firms we're working in as well. So what did we do? And this is probably, we really got going a couple of years ago. And when Ian was talking about his maturity levels, I was thinking, what are we on? We're probably not. Probably on 1, 2, and in some cases we might be a bit of a blend, because clearly you can have different types of levels for different types of apps. But we're just getting going. So I don't want to give you the impression this is perfect. We've got it cracked and we're wonderful and we're the exemplar app development house. We're not. We're doing some really good things. But we've got a lot more that we can be doing, and I think we've got certain things that are really now poking a hole through that sort of glass ceiling that I'll talk about in a minute. So the approach, we sort of just got on and did it. We didn't go into a business case conversation with someone and say, can we have this amount of money to run an app development buy an app development platform. We just sort of did it. And that's quite a brave thing for an IT department to do. And it's always the things that I say to people, IT departments shouldn't run these sorts of things. It should be from an organisation. It should be from the business. So we sort of ignored that. We just sort of got on with it. Because I think a lot of times people look at technology such as app development and don't quite understand what it's all about. And the iPhone really helped, clearly it really helped a lot of these sorts of solutions, but people still don't quite get what an app is, what an application is, why is it a good thing, why would I bother? So a business case that said, can we spend loads of money with someone like Fliplet, and people wouldn't have got through, because people said, well, that's not important, let's go and spend our money on sorting out a document management system or upgrading our email system. So we sort of got on and did it, and the benefit we had really was finding a couple of examples, and the examples were actually from our marketing team, our business development team, more accurately, that had a need to tell our partners about the firm. And that sounds crazy, but law firms aren't great at sharing knowledge within itself. They have a lot of different silos, offices, practice areas. So our business development team was all about, when a partner goes and sees a client, I want that partner to know everything at a reasonable level about Eversheds Sutherland as a large business. Not about technology, and that's another specific focus, but about what we do in Ipswich or in Hong Kong or in Atlanta. That sort of knowledge was quite lacking. So working with our business development director, we just sort of got on and built something, and Bavisa, who's in the audience today, worked with him actually reasonably, I'm not saying in isolation, but the two of them sort of almost colluded to create something in a good way. It was something that wasn't necessarily a big request from someone on high. It was just a cracking idea, a really good idea. And importantly, it wasn't a tech thing. It wasn't about presenting matter information on a device. It was about simple information. And you could call it brochureware, you could call it stuff that people should know about and pick up in the entrance hall for our firm. But it was, very importantly, it was knowledge that people should have, but people didn't. And it really gave a sort of a softer side of what we're trying to do as well. So, the willing sponsors and with Russell's help, getting that through made a big difference. And it was a very tricky exercise. Loads of people didn't like it. Loads of people thought, I don't know why I want to do that. I don't know why you want to put that information, or I don't like the colour of it. I don't like the branding of it. You've got to ride your way through that. You've got to keep saying, this is a good idea, this is worth doing. And importantly, it had a firm-wide application. So we got to the point where last June, we had our partner conference in the US, and we wanted to present it there. We wanted to show all of our partners that you've got something now on your iPhone that you can all get to that tells you about the firm, tells you what we're up to. And it gives you news, it gives you updates, it gives you some client information. We'll be slightly careful about that as well. And at that point, we decided, let's just make a big song and dance about it. So with a bit of coercion, I suppose, we convinced our CEO and our sort of comms director to talk about it on stage and make sure people realised it was there. And that was the real process we went through, which was getting a good sponsor, getting on and doing something about it, and then working out how we publicised it as well, rather than publicising that we're going to do something, getting a business case signed off and then doing it. So it's almost the other way around, where we just sort of got it on and did it. And what I like about the principles we're now following, we're now doing that with a whole bunch of people. So not to prove a point with that mobile apps, but to give people the ability to come to us with their ideas, so that we're just almost provided the platform and the awareness, and they're now able to say, yeah, I've got a great idea about this, that, and the other. I'm sure we can put that on a mobile device. And it's much less about the IT department doing it, and much more about the organisation itself doing it as well. And something very techy, mobile device management, you've got to make sure, and we did this quite late, that you can push it out to all devices. You've got to have the good old hygiene factor that most IT professionals will know about, that it's safe, secure, and you've got the right version on devices. Because the moment you give, I'll talk a bit about risk in a minute, the moment you give people wrong information, that's bad. Any of us using a map, that's a bad thing to get lost. If you're giving client information relating to some of their business activities, you won't get business from that client again. It will be a disaster if you give them wrong information. So there's a lot of very important lessons around mobile device management, which might sound boring, but they are very important. So considerations, what sort of things do we need to learn from on this basis? I mentioned at the beginning that my role's changed quite a lot. So I probably after 3.5, 4 years, went through a cycle of delivering loads of big IT projects, which are all very exciting and worthy, but you can't really get excited about elite upgrades or replacing a document management system too many times, especially when you speak to clients and all they want to speak to you about is legal technology and innovation and how we can help them. Whether it's the data example I gave you earlier, or whether it's in pitches, or whether it's just I've got a large legal team in my own office that is running around like headless chicken with paper, with manual processes. There's so much demand from clients on legal technology. And they're all lost themselves. They, you know, much like many law firms have been, they don't know where to go, and they go and buy these things just to make themselves feel better. So I sort of thought, well, there's a massive demand here. So we decided to split the IT department down the middle. That's not down the middle, actually, because my team now is much smaller than my peer, and he's a peer, not a direct report, that is running infrastructure and operations in IT. So, you know, Will Jenkins, anyone from Hogan Lovells here? So you know Will Jenkins. So Will's joined us now, and that's his job. He's the IT director. He works very closely with me. I work very closely with him. We both report into the managing partner. And his job is to run the really important stuff with the lion's share of our team that keeps the lights on and keeps the business running and builds the business. So, you know, he runs the business and he's growing the business to make sure that we can open new offices and we can develop new things. So a critical role. But I realised doing that as well as doing this is very hard to do. You don't tend to do this too much because you've always got a problem with your back-end systems. You've always got something that comes out of the woodwork in Hong Kong or a problem with the system. So whether that's doing what I've sort of, you know, pushed for with my role, or whether that's doing something with your own teams, splitting it down the middle so that we can focus on this sort of stuff much more has made a huge difference. It's only really been going since the new calendar year, so quite early stages. So we've now got much more of a focus on this, is my summary point, and all that. And we've got much more relationships with our partners and our clients to talk more about not just apps, but a whole bunch of other legal technology solutions. The word of warning is that apps aren't always the answer. So there's a lot of things that we think, yeah, let's stick it on an app. Well, you know, actually, it's still a classic application. It's still a website. It's still, you know, some kind of matter management system. It's still a bit of analytics coming out of something clever like Tableau or Power BI. You know, don't think apps are always the answer. They're not, you know, and we've got to be careful not to end up with a, you know, an overload on here as well. There's something else that we're pushing now at the moment is branding. We've got probably apps that look a little bit different and a bit inconsistent. Branding, making sure they're consistent is a key thing. And it's something that, you know, I wish we'd done slightly earlier so that we didn't end up with a confusing set of apps. I'm not sure we're there yet, but, you know, getting it branded properly so that it makes sense to people is really important as well. And I think when we launched our, what we call client conversation app, which is the app I used as an example earlier, then people always say, well, where do I go now? Do I go to the intranet site? Do I go to the website? Or do I go to the mobile app to find out who's got some expertise in a particular office? And it's a great point, because we do have 3 different platforms now. So our job is to sort of integrate them. So our, you know, a list of lawyers is an obvious one that we should always have. It needs to be integrated. It's not, it will be, and that's what we're working on at the moment. But there's that thing about where do I go as a lawyer, as a partner, where do I go to get my information? You're confusing me a little bit. Got to get that right. Got to get that much more clear as well. The answer to that, by the way, is no one's going to want to log on to an intranet site when they're out and about. They're going to want to get their phone out and have a look at who's good in a certain location. You know, the ability to talk to a client and say who's available in our Birmingham office in a particular trade, in our health and safety team, that's pretty powerful. You wouldn't do that on a website. You wouldn't do that on an intranet. And when you're out and about as well. And I think, you know, business change is a big chunk in here as well. People still don't quite get the principles of apps. They don't necessarily feel comfortable using data from a device to make decisions. You know, I refer to what I said earlier, the data has to be right, but people are still a little bit reluctant. It's not natural to say, I'm going to look at my phone and tell me an answer, because people still like to use the head, which clearly we don't want to stop that. People still want to be a bit more considered about using data to provide advice as well. We've also got to recognise that building apps, whilst it's, you know, it's always expensive using Fliplet. I'm joking, it's never it's obviously great value. But you've got support, you've got deployment. So when you give a client an app, which is the end position here, when they ring up, who do they ring? Do they ring the IT support desk? Do they ring the person in the business that came up with the idea? Do they just fend for themselves? You know, that's a tricky one. That's a big one. If you've got data and the maturity levels that Ian is sort of shooting for, then it is a real system, and they do need to have 24/7 support, especially when you're charging, potentially, for advice through a device. That's That's going to be a very big thing that we mustn't forget. It's not just about throwing out a really good-looking app as well. I talk about education because it's not just our lawyers. The clients need to understand, not because we're trying to push it, but trying to understand the concept of using an app to make their life much easier. This is not technical people talking to clients. This is about the marketing team, the partners, the lawyers saying, this is the right thing for us and for you. Therefore, we're going to use this to present information to you. Engaging with people who aren't technical is the way to do that. You won't do it through the technical team as well. And I think the quality advice, I come back, that's the real concern I have. When you've got a lawyer going into a conversation with a client, you're going to get good advice because of the track history, because that lawyer is brilliant at what they do, because they are. And they work incredibly hard to get their level of knowledge up. The moment you start using technology, and it's not just about apps, but using technology to present advice is risky, and you've got to make sure you control the data within it. My belief is that actually the more likelihood is that data is going to be right, blended with a lawyer, so you've got a bit of both, but you've got to make sure that you build that level of advice into the system. You can't just sort of do it once and forget to update it. I've seen many apps, we've all used apps that just die because the data gets worse and worse or more irrelevant as well on there. And I think, the overload of apps, there's so many that you could do, and if we're not careful, we'll end up with 10, 20, 30, 100 that just confuse it. I'm really keen on getting down to a very small number of very, very powerful apps. And then anything underneath outside that, and that number could be 5, it could be 10, it could be 2, it could be 1 to start with. Get rid of them. Don't even let them be on the App Store. Make sure people say you're not using that because it's just not right. Or if it is, but for a small set of people, just say that. If you have, and I've seen other law firms try a lot of this with their own technology awareness campaigns, just loads of stuff gets pushed out, and you think, where do I start? I was talking to our managing partner yesterday as part of my yearly review, and his passion at the moment is awareness of technology. Tell people a very small number of things we can do really well. They will tell clients, we'll win business, it will make clients' life easier. That's as simple as that. Apps are dangerous because you could end up creating many, many different instances in there as well. So I think we've got a lot of work to do. We've got a lot of awareness to do, and it's not about us trying to push apps because aren't apps great because they're on a mobile device. It's about the fact that this allows us to get that knowledge out to clients and knowledge out to our partners much more easily, and we can do a lot more things more quickly than the big traditional launch of large systems as well. So whilst I'm really keen to use good quality applications for a whole bunch of solid stuff, and certainly that's what my counterpart is now doing in the operations team. The apps I see as a great way of presenting that advice to make our lawyers so much more aware and informed when they're talking to clients, and I think we've got the real opportunity to hopefully get to something more than maturity 1, maybe 2, where we can provide much more live advice without a lawyer being there as well, which makes a lawyer's life much easier, and certainly is what clients are after. So yeah, that's me. That's the sort of main stuff I want to talk about. Just trying to keep the time. We have time for questions, as you said. So are there any questions or disagreements with what I've just said? Feel free to say it's all rubbish.
I was just wondering, the client app that you described,
Yeah.
what are you hoping to integrate it with? Are you going to go as far as integrating it with your practice management system so that you can feed in the expertise based on the actual work the lawyers are undertaking in the offices?
Yeah. So we've got integration with things like, as I mentioned, the intranet data and the website data. So like a people directory, but we've also got. Yeah, I mean it is moved, but So the one we're working on at the moment is availability of people. So how busy are people? Because what you often find is speaking to a client, they'll say, look, I've got this other problem relating to a particular thing that's happened somewhere. Can you put me in contact with someone? And clearly we want to say yes to that, we want to get business. So having a view from either a time recording system, we use Carpe Diem, or a practice management system that says how busy people are or how available people are is a really positive thing to do. So we've done that. Now we haven't done it with our Elite or our Carpe Diem system, we've done it with an Excel spreadsheet. Now that sounds a bit scary, doesn't it? But within our corporate team, they have been running an Excel spreadsheet for many years, and it's a very effective way of saying, this person's not that busy, this person is absolutely overloaded. They take data in itself from other places, but we take data from that Excel spreadsheet. And that's good enough, actually, good enough for a small pocket of people to get that level of knowledge that is accurate, because an Excel spreadsheet we know is accurate because everyone knows about it. It's protected really, and there's someone whose job it is to maintain it. So that sort of integration I think is okay, because it's not as good as using an API from Elite to make it really tight and really exact, but it's a quick thing that we've done, and it made a huge difference. And it's just a picture of the person, their name, their expertise, and a colour, so you can see how busy they are as well.
Say their expertise, would that, do you envisage in the future linking that to the actual, matters they have in your practice management?
Yeah, definitely. So,
At the moment,
definitely.
It sounds all very static. I'm not criticizing
Yeah,
because
it
I know
is.
it's difficult, but
Yep.
I'm just wondering what you're thinking about. I mean, as to the utilization point, I think we couldn't, if we linked it to our, system, practice management system.
Yeah.
The information lags behind reality.
Yeah.
So because people time record a bit later than what the actual reality
Yeah.
is at the time,
Yeah.
what they're doing. So I can
Yeah.
understand that.
The one thing about the people not updating data, the more visible you make it, the funnily enough, the more they then update it. So I had that conversation exactly about, time recording systems sometimes lag behind, and it's a real pain because, clients want to know live. They want to know live WIP. They want to know how much they're on the hook for at any one time. That's really important for clients to have that. But if it takes you 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or even a week to get your data into something like Carpe Diem or Intap Time, that's not great. If you give people visibility, if you gave clients visibility, it's amazing how many lawyers would then do it every day, and they'd do it. I know that's not easy sometimes, but I think the visibility of data really helps as well. The access to matter information is really important. So I think, much like your home banking app, you can see things like bank balance, you can see how much is on a credit card, all that good stuff. That's the sort of principle that our clients want us to have. The trouble is, there's a lot of confidentiality in there as well, because in some cases the matter information is confidential, and it can't even be shared within an organisation, within a particular product specialist team or a client team. And we've also law firms that have combinations with other parts of the, other branded, in our case the US isn't part of Eversheds Sutherland LLP, it's a separate business, but we just brand it through a Swift Verein. And therefore you've got client confidentiality issues between different parts of an organisation. None of that's technically based. It's all about just how we want to present information more publicly. I think there's also a reality, and my finance director wouldn't mind me saying that, the finance team want to control that knowledge that gets out there on matter information. I understand why, but that gets in the way of this sort of principle. So I think we can do it and we want to do it. It's just whether we are allowed to do it or whether we should do it based on that live information as well. But it's certainly the next stage. I think matter information that says how much is my WIP, who's got the particular, who's holding the pen at a certain stage, that's information that we'll get on a mobile device very quickly. Not necessarily through Fliplet, might be through another system, but it will be something that we will provide.
Can I ask one more question? What is Eversheds thinking around applications like Aperio? Because obviously all the law firms are trying to, find solutions for their own information and how to share that with clients. But now, we have some clients thinking about having a platform for that information to incorporate all of the law firm relationships they're working with.
Yeah.
What's your view on that?
Yeah, I mean, we've got clients asking us for that. We've had a large number, probably less than 10 over the last 6 months that have been saying, for the reasons you just mentioned, loads of panel firms, can you input into, or can you allow us to connect your systems into Aperio so that the client can see it? I mean, if I was a client, I'd be asking exactly the same. So, as a technologist and someone that's sort of, I hope you've got a bit of common sense, why not? Why wouldn't the client want that? Because at the moment they have to go to many people, and those many people then doing their own thing.
Lots of different hubs.
Yeah.
All of your law firms, one hub.
Absolutely.
That becomes unmanageable, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So I was speaking to one of our very large clients, last night actually, just talking about something completely unrelated about technology randomly. But they said, I just want to have one single view of all my panel firms. I don't want to have this worry about which PMS and who's got the access to what. They weren't talking about Aperio, but they were describing what Aperio can do. One single version of the truth. I think it's one of the things, it's slightly different to mobile app development, but it's probably the big trend that people are saying to me, I just want to see a single version of the truth. And it's really hard for law firms to provide that because we've got different systems, and it's really hard for clients to get it from their panels because they've all got different systems. So it's a real challenging one, and most clients won't want one law firm to go and build something clever because they'll say, well, I don't want to be on the hook, I don't want to be related just to that law firm because I want the other 3 or 4 or 5 or 60 on the panel to have their own systems as well. So it's a tricky one, but it's here to stay. It's something we've got to deal with, and when clients ask us for that sort of information, we just have to say yes. Just have to say yes. And every time we pitch now, it will include that sort of provision because they're expecting it.